Recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
From Oklahoma is recognized.
I want to begin. Obviously, my friend and I have some disagreement here, but let's talk for a minute about the form of what we're doing. My friend is correct in that this rule covers two different pieces of legislation that don't have anything substantive in common. However, the legislation itself will be debated separately. We'll have one debate on the Oklahoma-Texas issue involving the boundary between those two states and the tribal interest. They're also intimately part of that. We'll have a separate debate on the rules. So that's the appropriate way to proceed. There's no reason to have a separate rule for each one of these debates, but it is appropriate, as my friend suggests, to have two different debates because they are two different subjects. I'm going to disagree with him, and I'm probably being parochial in this sense, but if you live in Oklahoma, we actually think the border between Oklahoma and Texas is pretty important. And this is an issue that, frankly, was dealt with legislatively last year. This body did not vote out the bill. I actually opposed it last year because it did not take care of the tribal interests involved, and they had not been suitably dealt with. We actually amended the bill. Actually, I should say it was voted out, but it wasn't taken up by. But we changed it. But we kept working for many, many months. And Chairman Thornberry is the person who deserves most of the credit here to try and bring the parties together. Also, just by the way of explanation, so everybody's clear, this does not settle the issue. This doesn't force anything on the federal government or the two states or the tribes. It simply creates a common database. The two states have been asking for a complete survey of the contested area for many, many years. The BLM has refused to do that. You simply can't sort through this problem of a shifting border set well over a century ago with conflicting tribal interests if you don't have a common set of data here. So that's all that is being done here. I can assure you that certainly the tribes in question would not have consented to go forward if they thought they were having a solution imposed on them. What they think they're getting is a database that will allow them to determine exactly what their interests and rights here are, hopefully negotiate that with the two states in question, but if necessary, litigate the issue. So, we see this as a reasonable effort to bring parties together where there's a great deal of confusion through nobody's fault. And we think the BLM has been lax here and frankly may well be claiming things beyond its interest, but the survey, or beyond its authority, but the survey again will hopefully take care of that. So I hope that eases the concerns that people have. In terms of the drug rule, we see this as an issue where Congress made its intent in 2012 very clear. That is, we wanted these states to have options to make these decisions for themselves. We think the Department of Labor rule made that more rather than less difficult. We can argue over the merits of any individual, treatment of people that have illegal drugs or what the appropriate testing measures is or whatever. I happen to think those decisions are best made at the state level. Where you've got interested parties that are more knowledgeable about local conditions than us dictating a one-size-fits-all. So we just simply disagree on that. Finally, my good friend mentioned some concerns about the speed with which we're acting and also the form with which you're acting. The form, frankly, is basically dictated by statute. The Congressional Review Act dictates the manner in which we can bring these items on rules to the floor, the timetable which we can operate under. If we alter that over here, then, frankly, we lose privilege status in the Senate, and the chances of succeeding actually diminish pretty greatly. We think in this case the issues are pretty clear. These aren't really things that need to be amended. We need to decide whether or not the regulation is appropriate or not. If you think it is, you should vote in favor of keeping the regulation as it is and against this effort. If, on the other hand, you'd like to see decision-making devolve down to the states, where we think better decisions will be made, then you should vote in favor of the rule in the underlying legislation. So, again, I don't think these issues are overly complex. I do think this is an important time to deal with them. Again, we have a limited period of time on the Congressional Review Act. We have a certain format. We think we're abiding within both that time frame and that format. On the Oklahoma-Texas issue, border issue, it's a knotty issue. It's been around for decades. There have been multiple efforts to deal with it. Most of them have faltered because we've not had the various parties arguing from a common database as to what their positions are. We've asked the Bureau of Land Management repeatedly to survey the affected area. They've decided they didn't want to do that. In this case, Congress says, look, we've got 2 sovereign states, 3 sovereign Indian tribes here that have a concern. We want them to be able to work it through. We want them to draw on a common set of data. And so we're going to essentially make sure that that happens. And hopefully we can avoid a protracted court case between the states and the Indian tribes and actually resolve an issue that needs to be had. There are literally thousands of people along this border that are not certain whether or not they own the land that they have actually been farming, in some cases, for generations. There are 3 Indian tribes that have historic rights to this land that predate, frankly, the existence of Texas as a state, certainly the existence of Oklahoma as a state, that want to make sure their mineral rights issue and their land issues are appropriately handled and want to preserve their rights going forward if they want to litigate. Again, they need this kind of data to make those sorts of determinations. So I want to commend my friend, Mr. Thornberry, and again, look forward to working with my good friend from Florida on these issues. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.